Hello. Um, so this is chapter 10, and the two topics are related, but they're also kind of different. So we're dealing with language and we're dealing with cognition. And cognitive psychology is big these days. When I was in grad school, we were behaviorists, but the cognitive side won. This opening vignette has little to do with language. We'll come back to it when we get to decision making and cognition. I certainly remember this, but this is probably before you were born. I, I remember where I was, which is relevant to flashbulb memories when the Twin Towers were hit. I was teaching behavioral neuroscience at the University of Scranton. So it's an interesting vignette. Depending on what side of the political divide you're on, you may look at this differently, which is discussed later in the chapter. But language. Mark Breedlove and I think about things the same way. We have a desire to learn to use our motor skills, to develop moral reasoning, and also to acquire language. Oh, where's that cute video? Oh yes, there's this. This was viral at one point.
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct, but it's wordy and hard to read.
And it goes on. It's still funny after many years, and it's relevant to this chapter. We are compelled to learn languages, and if there isn't one available, and you have a partner, you make it up. So and what I've highlighted here is something that irritates me. Sometimes I think that the educational system is designed to torment children. I remember having to learn a second language in high school, and it was torture. And Mark Breedlove seems to have had the same experience, that you have to do it before, for most people, not for everyone, but for most, it has to be before 12. And it's like the American educational system, unlike every other educational system in second languages, waits until your brain has sort of firmed up, your sensitive period for language has passed, and then we force you to learn a second language. A hellish experience. First, I failed at learning German and decided it was German's fault, and then I tried Spanish, and that didn't work out either. I didn't realize that I was being tormented by the U.S. educational system. Phonemes, the basic sound units of speech. About 50. It depends on, in the United States, it depends on dialect. And I'm going to digress a bit here into an evolutionary perspective. Now, imagine you are a breeding population and you're getting up to around, this is the hunter-gathering story. You get up to like 100, 120 people. And about at that point, your breeding population often splits. And some people leave and go over the hill and start their own breeding population. Well, when there's a split like that, do you think all of the genetic diversity of the original population goes with the new group? And the answer is no. There's some reduction in genetic diversity. Well, language is made up of phonemes, which are basic sounds. And when that group leaves and goes over the hill and eventually develops a somewhat different language, do all the phonemes of the original language go with them? And like genes, the answer seems to be no. And I provided you with a link here. Whoops. Which I'm not going to, I want you to understand the basic relationship, but don't worry about the details of the research. But there's the graph. And there's a nice title, Human Dispersal and the Evolution of Languages Show Strong Link. Stanford biologists find. So you have different parts of the world with their own little colors, and you have arrows. And the longer the arrow, solid being phonemes, the more phonemes there are in that part of the world. And then there's dashed arrows. And the longer the arrow is there, the more diversity. And you can see that, humans virtually certainly evolved in Africa. Africa has the most genetic diversity and the most phonetic diversity. And, they have languages with, 100 or more phonemes, whereas our phonemes are quite a bit reduced down to around 50. What's interesting here is that the island populations who probably took the longest to get there and had the most splits, they have relatively reduced genetic and phonetic diversity. I had a son living in Hawaii, and they're not big on consonants in Hawaii. It's very different. The number of phonemes used on Pacific Islands is very reduced. So it's an interesting story. You're looking at the spread of humanity across the globe, and as we spread, we drop phonemes and we drop genes. but the phonemes are still in our heads, as we'll learn in this chapter. So phonemes, basic sound units of speech, and we have about 50. Morphemes, these are the simplest units of speech with meaning. There are many morphemes, and there are examples on this page of how you can break a word like unfathomable up into its morphemes and its phonemes. Now, semantics is where we take words, morphemes, and we assemble them into meaningful strings. And when we talk about learning languages in other species, syntax is a very big deal. How many words are there? Oh, geez. The average American high school graduate knows 50 to 60,000 words. And Pinker, I've mentioned him before. He's impressive. And there's number of English words. And I came online around 1950, and there's more and more words in English. Now, these two concepts are important, and they're important because of somebody who's going to be on the next page. And it's also important to learning language. Surface structure is, actually what you say. It's the actual words you say. Deep structure is what you mean. And there are people who study Creole languages across the earth. Creole languages are languages like those two babies, where you throw people together, usually slaves, and you don't want to educate them very well, and sometimes you make it illegal, and you just want them to be able to follow orders and do their slave work. And sometimes the first generation, the children, invent the Creole language for that group. And one thing that's common in Creole languages is double negatives, and those are pretty popular here in Scranton, PA, where people from different backgrounds were put together, and educating them historically was not such a big deal. And so if I said I don't know nothing, the surface structure is confusing. What exactly does that mean? But the deep structure, you have no problem understanding what that means. And when parents are dealing with children, they're often confronted with pretty bizarre surface structure, which they largely just, understand the deep structure and go on from there. So Noam Chomsky, there he is. Very politically active. He's cognitive. He had big fights with B.F. Skinner. Chomsky talked about the brain having language acquisition devices, which reached out and learned elements of language. Skinner, of course, thought it was just another form of learning, just people pecking keys, pigeons pecking keys. Largely Chomsky won. There's important elements of language acquisition that Skinner is happy with, but the foundation of language is much more in line with Chomsky's thinking. By the way, he didn't care about the brain very much. Chomsky, he just thought about concepts and invented concepts, and he talked a lot about surface structure and deep structure, and he's still active. Skinner is gone, but Chomsky is not. And then there's a discussion of language type behaviors in other animals and birds. This is important to your author, Breedlove. He was in the lab at UCLA that studied birdsong, although he branched off and did something quite different. And hemispheric differences in language. What's that? I'm supposed to take a drug. I'll do that later. And these were the birds that the lab that Breedlove was in were working on. He didn't. I don't think he worked with them much at all. He did his own thing. And there's the FOXP2 gene, and this I think it's Canadian, British family who have mutation in that gene, and they have a lot of trouble with language acquisition. And FOXP2 exists in other species as well. So, is there biology involved in language acquisition? Oh yeah, no doubt about it. FOXP2 may have always supported communication. Yeah. And ultrasonic vocalizations in rats and mice. They're ultrasonic, so you have to have special microphones to listen to it, but there's really interesting research with that. And there's the brains of affected and unaffected. So the unaffected, Broca's area is really lit up. The affected group, what they do in response to language is very spread out. And then there's the discussion of whether other animals can acquire language. In the psych department, we have had 2 faculty members who worked with chimps and language. And one of them dealt with American Sign Language, worked with the Gardners. And a lot of research here, lots of debates. There at the turn of the last century, 2000, psychologists were asked to list the most important discoveries of the preceding century, and 2 lists came from that. And on one of the major discoveries was animals can't learn language, and on the other list was animals can learn language. So you'll get an indication of how confusing this is. The research was clever. It was time consuming. And yeah, they can learn stuff, but is it truly language? I always tear up over this bird. Alex, you be good. See you tomorrow. I love you. And then the next morning, he's dead at 30. I really respected her research. She wanted an African gray and went to a pet store and didn't pick it herself. She just wanted an average African gray. And she did amazing work with Alex. I'm sure he still has his own web page. And he was not Clever Hans. He could really do stuff. Premack, yeah, he did research on language acquisition in chimps. They can't do what we do. They can do related things, but they can't do what we do. Babbling is big. When children start babbling, They don't act as if they're living in Scranton, PA. They act as if they're living on Earth, and they start emitting phonemes appropriate for the planet, including Africa, where they're using 100 phonemes, and there are click languages, which I cannot do. But I remember my children clicking. No, all right, so I can click. But in Scranton, we don't get very excited when our children click because we don't use those sounds in our language. We use b and m, and so Skinner is happy because parents reinforce certain sounds by responding to them more than other sounds. But Chomsky was definitely supported by babbling, that children start emitting sounds that arguably they've never heard. And then the environment starts, preferring some to others. And telegraphic speech, and this again is relevant to surface structure and deep structure. And there's a table of language acquisition, and it goes on for quite a while. And you can have pretty good conversations with 3, 4, 5-year-olds. But children that are much younger can certainly make themselves understood. And their surface structure may be pretty messed up, but we know what they mean. And developmental psychologists again do really clever research, and habituation from the learning chapter is relevant. And if you watch yourself say ba and pa, you can notice that basically your mouth is doing the same thing, but the sounds are different. So the difference is how long you'll hold the sound before you let it go. And they've done research with infants with a pacifier in their mouths, and you play the same sound over and over, and they get bored. You change the sound a little bit, but stay within the phoneme range that they're originally listening to. They notice it, but nothing big happens. But you go across a phoneme boundary, like the ba, pa phoneme boundary, and bam, little kids indicate that they hear something different. Phonemes are really important to us. And then there's research in terms of people from different cultures, and can babies hear the sounds? And of course they can. But as adults, the ability to hear certain phonemes can drop out, which is one of the reasons, again, if you're designing a culture and you care about children, don't wake them up too early in the morning to send them to school, and teach a second language way earlier in life. And Motherese, that sing song, way we talk to babies, not just mothers, but fathers too. And Williams syndrome. There's a very interesting genetic deficit here, 1 in 20,000 births. They really like people. They're very sociable. But there's serious problems with cognition. Language skills are pretty good. Math skills are often really not very good at all. Now, I have been doing research on faces, and I have a talk that I've linked to. First, we'll look at some Williams faces, thanks to our friends at Google. And there are fairly characteristic faces. And why this is important to me is the face and the brain are way more related than certainly I thought. And I use this figure in my PowerPoint. These are characteristics of a Williams syndrome face, and their ears are often a bit pointy. They're very verbally gifted. They're very friendly, and I believe they underlie some myths that different cultures have, including my own, about little fairy-like things that run around and have the gift of gab and are very friendly. Oops, this didn't take me where I wanted. Down here is my face research. There's some stuff that Darwin did with faces. And I started off doing the links of fingers. By the way, I did this because your author did it, Mark Breedlove, and it relates to his interest in hormones in the brain. And I mean, you can look at this, and there's what got me started, finger length ratios and sexual orientation. And look at the last author, Mark Breedlove, and the author before him is his collaborator and wife. So that's kind of interesting. I'm not going to deal with it, but I'm now into the head. This is a very important book. Aggression in males is related to some facial characteristics and also penalty minutes in hockey players. And it also relates to violent and nonviolent sex offenders. And this last author here, Baumeister, he spoke at the University of Scranton. So these are quotes that relate to the face. The brain is the foundation on which the various parts of the developing face grow, and the face predicts the brain. And there's Down syndrome. Very characteristic faces and very characteristics issues in relation to cognitive abilities. And there's the picture I just told you about. And there's pixie-like people. When I was growing up, you'd have to probably ask a grandparent. This was a popular children's show, Howdy Doody, and until I made this lecture up, I had no idea that Howdy Doody was so closely allied with people who had Williams syndrome. So I'm not assigning this, I'm just saying I'm interested in it. And sensitive periods. And again, I'm reminded of how evil it is to wait until it's too late and then try to teach people how to acquire a second language. There are relevant data there. Age of acquisition of second language. And 11 to 15, when they tried to force that into my head at prep, it was a nightmare. My advisor at UCLA had a Mexican person working in the house, and try as he might, he could not learn to speak with her. But he had two children in the house, and they could chat it up with her. They had acquired Spanish very nicely because they had been exposed to her during an appropriate phase of life. Dyslexia, I had to give a talk relevant to that on brain development. I'm still amazed that we can read at all. Where did that come from? And more common in boys than girls. Almost any problem in the brain is more likely in males than females. But not being able to read does not mean you're stupid. And I believe on the next page, let me see if there's anything else I want to say here. And they're trying to figure out, and can do some things to improve it. And there's a indication from brain scans that training can help things. And there are some people who are certainly not stupid who have dyslexia. And I wonder if he'll be going to space soon. Time will tell. Aphasia means without speech, and TAN is an important case studied by Paul Broca, who I don't like. He was a racist and a sexist. But there's Tan's brain right there. That's the real deal. And there's Broca's area, which is what was destroyed there. So damage to Broca's area produces a what's called Broca's aphasia. It's non-fluent aphasia. It's very labored speech. I used to show videos of people with this disorder. It's painful to listen to. You know they know what they want to say, they just can't say it. It's not a paralysis. I mean, your motor strip is here in the back of the frontal lobe, so it's close to the motor strip, but it's not a paralysis. Wernicke's, because he was a German, aphasia has damage in the temporal lobe, and that's a fluent aphasia. Now, fluent usually means, can you speak Spanish? Oh, yeah, I'm fluent in Spanish. What this means is that you may talk a lot, but you don't make typically a lot of sense. And so you should know them and what types of damage causes them. The WADA test, Brenda Milner, who I've already done a love letter to her. She did some research with this kind of a test where you inject a short acting anesthetic into the carotid artery and put one hemisphere to sleep or the other, and you see what happens to different things, language often being the target. And whether you're left or right-handed, you tend to speak and largely understand speech with your left hemisphere. Oh boy, yeah, we're coming up on something pretty dramatic here. Damn. So that's an MRI of a person who had serious seizure disorder focused in the left hemisphere, and they just could not get it under control with drugs. So amazingly, they went in and took out the left hemisphere. And you would think, well, goodbye language, goodbye control of your contralateral body, goodbye. But this was done early. And if you do it early, you can have an amazing recovery. And as I think the vignette talks about, that person graduated from college. So what's the right hemisphere for? And these are cute data, recognizing self and celebrities, and using the WADA test. and recognizing self, the right hemisphere, seems to be pretty important. You get some odd deficits when you damage the right hemisphere. Linguistic relativism. I don't think very much about this, but there are data on this, and the language you speak does affect cognition, or is related to cognition. And there's this story about Russian blues, and they have two different words for dark blue and light blue. And there's a spectrum of blues, and I think it's 8 and 9. Yes, 8 and 9 is where they distinguish, and their ability to distinguish the hues is better than ours because they have different words for them. And there's the famous examples of Eskimos having a bunch of words for snow. I used to do cross-country skiing when I was in Maine, and we became obsessed with snow. And in those days, you had to put a wax on your skis to match the snow. So you would come in and you'd sample the snow on the way in, and then you'd talk about, well, what color wax should we use today? Grasshopper. And the numbers, some cultures don't have, counting words, and some cultures have counting words that are better than ours, and those people can acquire number skills a little bit better than us. And so it's relevant. And then we get into cognitive. And this is, it's an amalgam. It's a mix of many fields. And I'll admit it, they're very clever. And they use tools that are ancient and new. Categorization. Now, a negative term for categorization is stereotyping. And some people are told, oh no, stereotypes are bad, we shouldn't do that. Well, I have a stereotype of chairs. I mean, if you want to evaluate every chair as a unique chair and get to know it before you prejudge it as being a chair, you'd never sit down. So forming categories is a fundamental part of being human. And prototypes can be very important for this. That looks like a chair. It's probably a chair. And then there are all these dogs. It's hard to believe they're all one species, eh? They're all one species. It takes time to process, and this I like because it's simple reaction times. This is one of the few times I'm happy with Jung, although I'm sure when he did his timing, he didn't do it very precisely. He did it subjectively, but early experimental psychologists did timing much more precisely. And how long it takes you to respond is an indication of often the cognitive load. So there's the Dutch physician, something in Dutch, Donders. He did really clever stuff, and he did it a long time ago. And we're still doing things that are quite related to this. And, modern reaction times, are they the same? And are you using different kinds of letters? Very interesting. And it's somewhat related to IQ scores, which will be later. And we're better at numerals than we are spelled out words. So it's a powerful research technique. So there's reaction time. Higher is worse. You're slower with your left hand because your left hand is controlled by your right hemisphere, and your right hemisphere has to kind of be told what to do by the left hemisphere. And if they're close to 5, you have to think about it more. If they're far from 5, you don't have to think about it more, and therefore it's faster. It's cute. Mental imagery, which there was just a study that some people don't seem to have this, but I think they must. And your mind's eye, and Darwin apparently could visualize things very well, but some people don't. And this test, I worked with it. You have these blocks, and sometimes you have to recognize whether the two blocks are the same thing but rotated, or are they different patterns of blocks. And those data are amazing. So reaction time in seconds, whether they're rotating in the plane of the paper or into the three-dimensionally into the depth of the paper. I'll tell you, man, you don't get behavioral data in psychology where the dots hit the line very often at all. I am impressed, and these things hurt my head. I don't like doing them. Different forms of brain imagery, what goes on when we imagine things, which is, I'd like to know what the data are relevant to these people who seem to have no mental imagery. I don't know. Morse code, I remember learning that when I was in Boy Scouts. Skill learning. If you cognitive phase, the initial phase. I mean, good luck to you if you have to think about riding a bike while you're riding a bike. So then associative phase, where you get better, and then autonomous phase, when you get quite good at it. And there's people outstanding in their fields. Bobby Fischer, very clever. I used to be obsessed with checkers. I had to give it up. I was too competitive. Yeah, I mean, tremendous skills. And there's an overview of what's probably going on: skill learning and expert performance. And autonomous phase means you can ride your bike, but if you want to get better, you want to go toward expert performance, and that requires lots and lots and lots of practice. And was the movie that was just popular about chess, Queen's Gambit, or that was a good movie. Had some good cars in that movie. So there's this obsession with 10,000 hours. You really got to practice. Bill Gates, by the way, was lucky enough to live as a child where he could bicycle over to his local college, and they had an open programming room, and he could go in there right off his bicycle as a kid and start programming. And that helps you get really good. And boy, Tiger Woods, his dad had him playing golf at a very, very early age. Speaking of sports skills, this research on soccer is interesting. And it ain't horoscopes. It's, like going to school. There are these age cutoffs. If you're born before this date in the calendar, you're in one class. And if you're born after that date, you're in the other class. And if you're after that date, when you start playing soccer or anything else, you're the biggest, probably most coordinated kid in the class. And you're still quite young, and you can be quite good. And the coach pays more attention to you, and you're more likely to be chosen for these special teams and summer training. And the soccer players who are, you know, uh, at the highest level are more likely to be born in certain months, and those months are usually at the beginning of the year when they teach children to play soccer in Europe. Subliminal perception. This is, very interesting, like hypnosis. I don't care about it very much. It's not a powerful effect if it's an effect at all. Flow is very interesting. I used to do a lot of programming and in JavaScript, and when I got in the zone, when I couldn't even talk. People would be asking me, what are you doing with programming? And I had to just stifle them. I can't tell you. I just got to do it. Not much science on this, but it's probably pretty true. There's more on the subliminal attention spotlight is big. And William James talked about this. He didn't do it with computers. This is again clever research. We make people look at the dot, and usually there's a camera that is checking you're actually looking at the dot. And then not unlike the earlier research dealing with iconic memory, we cue you where to look on the screen, or where what you're looking for is going to be on the screen. And you can turn your attentional spotlight to that quadrant of the machine. And if we do that, you do better. And related to this is the cocktail party effect. It's amazing how typically able to focus on a conversation, often in chaos. There's some thinking that elements of schizophrenia make it difficult to do this. But it's an important part. Oh boy, yes. The famous the gorilla in the midst. So this relates to attention and inattention. So I have given you a video on this. Whoops. And unfortunately, I think there's a commercial.
Feels weird picking it up. The legacy of that shield is.
Okay, so
This is a test of selective attention. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball.
So that's where your attention is supposed to be. And each time the white people pass the basketball, and you're counting them, 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 and you're counting, and you're counting them, and a number of people never see that gorilla. They just do not see the gorilla. It's amazing. And all of this attention stuff makes me really worried about eyewitness testimony. And Elizabeth Loftus comes to mind. You think you're paying attention to the video clip, you're not. You're very focused on only part of it. And you don't see the gorilla. Amazing. And now Breedlove goes back to the opening vignette, which I'll leave and leave up to you. Change blindness is important, and there is a video. There's actually a few videos that demonstrate this, where you're talking to somebody. That's me with the white hair giving directions, and then people walk through with a painting, and the person you're talking to starts carrying the painting, and then somebody who was carrying the painting you haven't seen shows up on the other side, and an incredible number of people don't notice that they're talking to a new person. And there's also the mention of where you're getting paperwork from somebody behind a table, and they bend down to get the piece of paper, and when they come back up, they're a different person, and a lot of people don't notice. So the attentional blink, these are nice data. So if you've detected the target, you kind of take a mental break, and it's more difficult for you to detect the target again. Very cute research, very lawful. These people are extremely good at what they do. But worry about the judicial system. Okay, decision making, which we do all the time. Judgment, error and bias, and false alarms and hits, which were discussed in terms of signal detection back in the sensation and perception chapter, and X-rays and breast cancer, and which kind of error is more damaging. And there's latency again. Things that are difficult to do take longer. And of course, you're more likely to make errors. And you can think back to the oboist example from the earlier chapter, where everyone knows women can't play oboes really well, but when you don't know who's playing, the woman is the best I've ever heard. And these are sobering things about human judgment and handwriting affecting high school teachers' grading of papers, the SAT written, where people were inserted gibberish, but they used big words to do their gibberish, and they got 5 out of 6, 5 out of 6. The home field advantage, that's really interesting. Umpires. And violins. Everybody knows you want a Stradivarius if you have the money. But when you do blind tests, that doesn't seem to bear out. We have to do good science. We can't just accept things as true. And this is interesting too. Wheel of Fortune, and well, it's not Wheel of Fortune, but you spin a wheel and you get one number or a different number, and that affects uh, how many countries in the United Nations are from Africa. Yo, dude. And then anchoring also in terms of prices. And, people play this game when they try to get you to buy things. And we all make the money haul. I remember when the book talks about an author who wrote about this in a newspaper column. Nobody does newspapers anymore, but they got 10,000 letters, including from mathematicians, saying that she was wrong, but she was not. And you have to look at this over and over before it'll make sense. But it's true, and it goes against our bias. And the gambler's fallacy that we tormented at UCLA. We tormented a medical student an undergrad who wanted to go into medical school because he was sure that if a coin was flipped 3 times and they were all heads, the next time it would not be 50-50 heads or tails. And we just had to let him go. We gave him back his money and let him go. He couldn't be convinced even when he saw that he was losing tons of money. And hindsight bias, boy, this is important stuff. We knew it all along, but you didn't. And then this is stuff everybody knows. That's not surprising. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Everybody knows that, of course. Why is this surprising? Why do people take psychology? Everybody knows this stuff already. All those statements are wrong. What everybody knows ain't necessarily so. And confirmational bias, where there's something related to this cherry picking, where I see this on Facebook all the time in political arguments. You wait until something comes along that fulfills your bias, and then you say, see. So if you think that people go nuts around the full moon, you remember things around the full moon that confirm that bias. But we can do science on this. And there's emergency room visits and the full moon, and it's not there. Belief persistence. Even if you accept new evidence, you still tend to hold on to your. Sorry, I held on the key too long. You still tend to hold on to your pre-existing beliefs. Very difficult to get people to change their beliefs. Arguably, in some ways, it's best to not even try. There are data that if you argue with someone about their beliefs, that they become more convinced they were right than before you started. Why bother? We hate to lose. We hate to lose. Now, this is pretty relevant to medicine because physicians have to make decisions, and how things are framed can have a huge effect on decisions that can affect people's lives. So in blue, 70% preferred A. And in whatever color that is, pink, 80% preferred D. And they're the same. And casinos, I mean, gambler's fallacy again. We don't want to walk away losers, although in a casino, that's exactly what happens on average. We don't want to lose money. We want to gain money. There's a discussion of gambler's fallacy. And there's Elizabeth Loftus down the bottom of the page. And this is really important. And my friend who was a lawyer, he didn't take social psychology. He didn't know about this. And he came and talked at our psychology conference. And he shared a panel with the social psychologist who went over this kind of stuff. And at the end, the guy said, "Oh, geez, if you would move to Los Angeles, my law practice and other law practices would pay you a fortune to tell us how to present evidence." And so this, this famous question, how fast were the cars going when they blanked into each other? And what word goes there can have a big effect on what they saw in the movie they had just seen, and even whether there was broken glass. So it's frighteningly easy to affect people's judgments in situations that can have sometimes life and death consequences. Tower of Hanoi, this is a classic test where you have to learn to rearrange the discs with certain rules to get them reversed. And the set of rules would be an algorithm, and programmers often use algorithms. And algorithms simplify decision making. If they work, that's really good. If they don't work, not so much. Availability heuristic. I mean, you see this a ton with the debate over COVID vaccines and masks and things that are now unfortunately politically relevant. And I love those data. Americans are 30 times more likely to die from fallen airplane debris than shark attacks. We have trouble assessing likelihood, and the media, wants you to watch their shows and read their stuff, and so they talk about horrible crimes, and they try to whip everyone into a frenzy about, oh my God, crime is so bad. We have to read more about crimes. But we're more at risk from diabetes and stomach cancer. Working backward is one strategy that we can use to problem solve. And there's a nice little example there of necklaces in New Orleans, and how many, I see Mary, who else is there? Jenny and Mary. Working backwards works there. And I remember being confronted by this monk problem before. That graphic really helps. And I think I was convinced that there was no guarantee that they would be in the same spot. But once you see that graphic, it's pretty overwhelmingly true that they will cross paths. Insight, sometimes referred to as the aha phenomenon. This is what in my normal classes, I try to teach for this. I try to keep you confused, give you all the pieces, but try to have you put the pieces together to gain insight into the problem or have an aha. Because if you do that, you'll never forget. But if I just give you the answer, you may forget when you walk out the door. Choice blindness. This is amazing too. People defending choices they did not make. The easily manipulated group. And that's the end of this. So two different, very different topics being confronted here. Language acquisition. Chomsky won the battle with Skinner. Now Chomsky's a cognitive psychologist. So I guess it makes sense that we did cognitive in the second half of the chapter. So there we go. Chapter 10, right? This is chapter 10, right? Yes. Language and cognition. And I believe the test on this ends block 2.